Now we will move on to the discussion session with Khenpo. Each person may ask up to 2 questions, or you can write them down on a slip of paper. When it's time to ask your question, we will pass the microphone to you. Since I'm closest, I'll take the opportunity to ask 2 questions first. Respected Khenpo, I am a teacher at the School of Management, Xi'an Jiaotong University. I would like to ask you 2 questions, one of which is a common concern. Many students attach great importance to cultivating their moral character. Among your many translated and annotated works, which one would you most recommend as the first to study in order to gain the greatest benefit? This is my first question. The second question is a philosophical one. A few days ago, when we were discussing online, it was very difficult to get an answer. The question is as follows. There is a philosophy exam question that asks the examinee, if the test paper in front of you contains a question that says you are in a dream, what method would you use to disprove or refute it and to say in this situation that you are not in a dream? Please provide your answer. Thank you very much.
Professor Chen's first question can be answered like this. I have translated some treatises of Tibetan Buddhism and have also given some teachings. Later, some individuals also compiled and organized them. But from my own experience, whether you consider it from the perspective of ethics or from the field of Buddhist studies, no matter which particular aspect or angle you choose to look at it from, after studying the text Bodhicharyavatara, those with genuine faith truly benefit in terms of their spiritual beliefs. Even for those without faith, after studying it, their intense anger, overwhelming stress, persistent anxiety, and deep suffering are gradually alleviated and eased. So in India, the Bodhicharyavatara, composed by Master Shantideva, is extremely famous. In today's terms, that is, in other words, the best-selling book is Bodhisattva Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara. In our Tibetan region, regardless of which school it is, whether it's the Gelug or Nyingma, all schools require its study. Nowadays, in Han regions, many universities and some teachers, after studying it, have found it provides a significant amount of guidance in their lives, especially in their everyday experiences. So I hope that everyone, from a common or truly beneficial perspective, can study the Bodhicharyavatara from beginning to end at least once. It will definitely have a tremendous impact on every aspect of your life. This is the first point I wanted to make. The second point is, in fact, also mentioned in the Diamond Sutra, as a matter of fact. All conditioned phenomena like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. In fact, all conditioned phenomena are essentially no different from dreams or illusions. However, for a beginner, at first, this perspective may not necessarily be accepted, but it's best to have an understanding of both dreaming and waking. Mipham Rinpoche, a great master from Tibetan region, once held a debate about dreaming and waking. This debate was used as a rhetorical method to have one person argue from the perspective of dreaming and another from the perspective of being awake. Then the two would debate each other, but in the end, neither side won or lost. On the surface, it seems like the waking side should win, but in reality, that's not the case. Right now, we are also dreaming. We often say that life is like a dream. Actually, there is a very profound meaning in this. So I was thinking, if you really want to explore this, I've also talked before about the song of the debate between waking and dreaming. If you slowly study this principle from beginning to end, there was a time, not long after I first arrived here, our teacher taught us the song of the debate between waking and dreaming. For a period of time, I also felt as if life itself was just a dream, no different from a dream at all. I couldn't give any reason for it. Because in this debate, we tend to think that what we have now is something solid, that I can touch things with my hands right now, and I can see them with my eyes. But in dreams, all of this exists as well. If I feel like time is long right now, actually, in many stories about dreams, including the so-called A Dream of Nanke and the Yellow Millet Dream, there are also similar stories in many idioms. When we dream, sometimes it feels like a very long time has passed. So in every aspect, there really isn't any solid basis for it. This might require us to carefully read the texts again, perhaps even more than once. Especially in the Avatamsaka Sutra and the Samadhi Raja Sutra, there are numerous detailed descriptions about this as well.
All right, let's all listen to this as if it were a dream. Thank you.
Hello, Khenpo Sodargye. I would like to let you know that my mother is actually your devoted disciple. Because you are my mother's teacher, you are also my teacher. I am a student at Shanxi University of Science and Technology. Tonight, I made a special trip from the northern suburbs to come here. I came especially to fulfill my mother's wish, which was to meet you in person. After meeting you, I feel deeply moved. I also want to ask you 2 questions. The first question is, actually, I took refuge when I was 9 years old. Since I was little, my mother has always told me a lot about Buddhist teachings. Although I haven't read many Buddhist scriptures, I still understand some of the principles. In Buddhism, you need to have a heart of gratitude and a sense of contentment. But as a university student, I'm now in my 3rd year and have finished my major courses. I often work with my professors on research projects now. And I've found that when we're working on research projects, we all have a sense of dissatisfaction. Because only when you have a sense of dissatisfaction during the research process, after reaching a certain level or height, if you feel dissatisfied, only then can you keep pushing forward and continue to delve deeper into science. So in this sense, I find it very contradictory. In science, we should approach research with a sense of dissatisfaction. But in life, we should treat everything in the world with a sense of contentment. I'm not quite sure how to balance these 2 directions, so I hope you can give me some guidance. So that's my first question. The second question is, because I took refuge in Buddhism at the age of 9, and I've heard a lot of Buddhist teachings, so from a young age, I have felt that Buddhism is truly genuine and is a way of learning that can greatly benefit all of human society. I hope that even though I'm just a student right now, I can do my part, however small, to influence the classmates around me. Because I've noticed that many of my classmates are very restless during class. They don't want to listen in class, and they don't want to study seriously. All they want is to make money, and make more money. I feel that many college students nowadays have distorted values and ways of thinking. I just hope that I can do my small part to influence them. How should I influence and help them? Thank you.
First, about your so-called sense of contentment. Actually, when we talk about contentment, we mean being content with worldly desires. For example, when it comes to wealth, you should be content in areas that are not useful to yourself. But when it comes to seeking knowledge, we should never be satisfied. Our great Sakya Pandita from Tibetan region also said this in his maxims. The ocean is never satisfied. The more water it receives, the more it wants, because all the rivers flow into the sea. Yet the ocean is still willing to accept even more water. In the same way, a wise person should never be content with the knowledge they have. That is what he said. So from this perspective, our desire for knowledge and wisdom, whether it's our attitude towards scientific research or studying Buddhism, I think in these areas, people should never feel satisfied. It's not like I've graduated from college, so it's as if I've already attained enlightenment. Many students and some people, once they get a job, never read books again. From then on, they stop learning altogether, but in fact, we should never feel content when it comes to acquiring knowledge. Even with worldly knowledge, I believe the more you learn, the more meaningful it becomes. We should never feel satisfied in our pursuit of learning. This is the Buddhist perspective. This is also an essential attitude when it comes to exploring science. Secondly, speaking about you personally, you have had a strong and enduring faith in Buddhism and have taken refuge since childhood. I personally rejoice in this very much indeed, truly, in your future work and in your own life. I think, first of all, no matter how much I can achieve, I must not harm any living being around me. I believe this is the most precious intention to have. Including insects as small as ants and above, I do not intentionally harm them. And on the basis of this mindset, I want to do my best to help society. Of course, the causes and conditions from your past lives and this life are different for everyone. Each person has different karmic conditions, but I think that if you have this aspiration, then perhaps in your future life, this intention of yours will shine and benefit many living beings.
Hello, Master. I am a student from Xi'an Jiaotong University. I am also a disciple of the Longchen Nyingtik lineage. I would like to ask the Master a question. The view of emptiness arises from bodhicitta, and bodhicitta comes from compassion. How can we actually practice compassion in our daily lives? Thank you, Master.
It is quite rare that you are a disciple of the Nyingtik lineage. Within the Nyingma school, the Nyingtik lineage is indeed a very profound Dharma path. I sincerely hope that in the future, regarding the Nyingtik teachings, because the Nyingtik teachings are according to the aspirations of Venerable Vimalamitra, Guru Padmasambhava, and Venerable Jigme Lingpa, Nowadays, there are especially many practitioners both in China and abroad. Moreover, it is very swift. Many signs and experiences can arise in the continuum of people's minds. This includes devotion to the lineage masters, compassion for sentient beings, and so on. In this way, as you just mentioned, the so-called view of emptiness relies on bodhicitta. Bodhicitta arises based on compassion. At the beginning of Master Chandrakirti's Entering the Middle Way, it is explicitly stated that bodhicitta is originally the cause of the Buddha's children. This is just as explained there. So, how do we cultivate compassion now? In your favorite Words of My Perfect Teacher, as well as in the preliminary practice memorandum, how to practice the Four Immeasurables is already explained very clearly. You must look up the basic methods for practicing the Four Immeasurables. Once you have cultivated compassion, all the subsequent virtues can naturally be accomplished.
Hello, I am a student from Xi'an Jiaotong University. Although I don't have a deep understanding of Buddhism, I do believe in some of its principles, such as the simple idea that good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished. Now, I have a question regarding the issue of good deeds being rewarded and bad deeds being punished. For example, if I live a simple life and do good deeds every day, but if I live in a city, every day I still have to deal with things like gutter oil and toxic milk powder. And if I go out, I might encounter shoddy construction, subway collisions, or traffic accidents. How should I understand why I still have to bear these things? So does that mean I can only, for example, escape from the city?
这样的 what you just said is actually very real. In fact, nowadays there are many things we need, including among Buddhists and intellectuals, that require us to learn together and communicate with each other. Among these, the idea that good deeds are rewarded and evil deeds are punished is something many intellectuals tend to believe in. But for many of them, what they believe is that good deeds are rewarded in this very life. Once the rewards for good deeds in this life are over, most people don't care about the next life. This in itself is a kind of tragedy for humanity. A lot of people wonder, if I do good deeds in this life, will I see the results immediately? But in fact, the cycle of samsara is a very long spiritual process. Some good deeds do indeed bear fruit within this very life. You do them in the first half of your life, and they may come to fruition in the second half. But some, or even many, only mature after several lifetimes. In this process, when we face society today, for example, issues like gutter oil, toxic milk powder, shoddy construction projects, and so on, these are some real problems in society. At this time, we should cultivate a particularly pure mind, and we ourselves should have a very sincere attitude. We should work with a sense of responsibility toward our families, society, and even all people. During the course of our work, Buddhism also teaches that if we are completely unaware and unintentionally commit some wrongdoings, for example, when we are walking, we might accidentally step on and kill some insects on the road, but this does not constitute the full extent of the wrongdoing. Therefore, in any workplace, you might not notice certain things as you go about your work. While you are doing your job, you may not always be aware of the hidden darkness behind it. But once you become aware of it, or when you take on this responsibility yourself, you must absolutely not harm any living being. That's why I often say that the Buddhist view of compassion today is indeed a very responsible attitude for all of human society. Even if I am extremely poor or in any situation, I will not harm sentient beings, nor will I harm others. With this kind of mindset for society as a whole, the overall quality of the entire population will naturally improve. This is what we most advocate in Buddhist education, to help sentient beings unconditionally. But now, people are unconditionally harming sentient beings. So these two are completely opposite. Some time ago, I read an article written by a Tibetan person. He said that our Buddha, without any conditions, offered his own flesh and blood to sentient beings. There are many, many such examples in the Buddha's biographies, but now people without any conditions, for the sake of just one meal for themselves, begin to consume the lives of many sentient beings, killing countless beings. So many of us are truly shameful. Compared to the spirit of the Buddha, humanity is indeed extremely cruel.
Respected Khenpo Sodargye, thank you for your compassion. I was also once a student at Xi'an Jiaotong University. Today, I would also like to ask a question. Now, through the internet, because information online is more open nowadays, we can see many regrettable social and political phenomena. As intellectuals who can help others through words and ideas, should we use the internet and our own efforts to expose these unjust social phenomena and awaken a sense of justice in more people? Or should we focus our minds on our own practice and realization so that we can have a purer mind when facing our own lives as well as the lives of those around us? I would like to sincerely ask Khenpo for his advice and guidance.
We are indeed living in the age of internet information now, which is completely different from the past. It's also entirely different from the 20th and 19th centuries. Nowadays, as soon as anything happens and is uploaded online, countless people can immediately see it. At this time, depending on each person's own motivation, some people focus mainly on themselves while others focus on helping others. But what is truly valuable? Valuable to life and to our existence. What we know should be shared for the greatest happiness. Keeping it to oneself brings the greatest pain. The world often says the same, be strict with yourself and lenient with others. Therefore, I think for many of us, if we can, without affecting our own practice, make use of the internet and modern scientific tools and help even just one person around us, that is already very meaningful and valuable. Because nowadays, many people are especially troubled and confused. They basically have no direction or goals. Many people spend their days with no other choice but to search online for some sense of spiritual belonging. But in the end, they can't find it and instead encounter false teachers, which leads them even more quickly and easily astray, causing them to fall onto the wrong path. At such a time of spiritual crisis in this kind of era, it is crucial that we rely on the internet to help save others' lives or spiritual well-being. Therefore, many of us here today, including some university professors, are playing games every day, even at the university. When I see this, I feel particularly uncomfortable. In fact, as university professors, the people they are educating are about to enter society and will have to take on significant responsibilities for society and for their families as well. So if we are educating people in such schools, and the teachers themselves are playing games every day, and are themselves engaged in things that are especially empty and illusory, so I especially hope that each of us, of course, some people may not have an altruistic mindset, and the mind plays a leading role, so there's nothing that can be done about it. But if you do have altruism, and your own practice is basically unaffected, even if it is affected to some extent, I think this altruistic intention is especially meaningful. Therefore, right now, a lot of space on the internet is not occupied by good educational ideas. Much of it has already been taken over by all sorts of messy and negative social influences. And even more people are being contaminated. Our hearts and minds have also become increasingly polluted, generation after generation, to a truly frightening degree. The environment, too, is polluted by all kinds of modern industrial machinery. Every breath we take in and out is filled with all sorts of polluted air. If both inside and outside are polluted, then living in this world, let alone our next life, even in this life we are not living healthily. Our bodies are unhealthy and our minds are unhealthy too. So through the internet, we should do our best to promote positive traditional culture and beneficial knowledge.
Hello, Master. I am an MBA student at Xi'an Jiaotong University. I have a question I'd like to ask. I have a friend who is the same age as me this year. He is now suffering from a terminal illness, duodenal cancer, and may not have much time left. I originally wanted to bring him here today, hoping you could offer him some guidance. He just received this news recently. He is feeling extremely distressed and can't accept this reality. But for various reasons, he wasn't able to come here today. As his friend, I truly don't know how to help him with this issue, but I really hope I can do something for him. So I would like to ask the Master to use a Buddhist perspective to assist him in facing the days ahead and advise him and support him on what he should do. Thank you, Master.
Actually, when it comes to the moment of death, it is indeed a very sad thing for everyone involved, whether from a Buddhist perspective or a worldly one. For example, from a worldly point of view, no matter how wealthy or high status you are, not long ago, as everyone knows, When Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, passed away, actually when he was 17 years old, he had already come across a motto earlier in his life, perhaps during a quiet moment of reflection. This motto, which stood out to him, said, "Live every day as if it were your last." This is what Buddhism refers to as all things are impermanent. In other words, if I were to die tomorrow, I would be prepared in all aspects of my life. Actually, many people have this mindset. It seems like only others die, but I won't. In fact, each of us should be mentally prepared for this. If I were to die today, what would I leave for my family? What have I contributed to society? What have I accomplished myself? Because our bodies are especially fragile. Indeed, whether it's cancer or a car accident, if none of these external causes arise, there is no reason for it. But for each of us at any moment. This is something Buddhism truly addresses very well. Because if one regularly contemplates all things are impermanent and practices accordingly, then when facing death, there is no fear. For example, Steve Jobs also studied Buddhism from a young age. When he passed away, he was especially calm and did not suffer in that way. So I think your friend may not necessarily practice Buddhism, and even if they do, some people might just keep the idea of impermanence in mind without truly practicing it. When it really comes time to face it, it's very difficult for it to have a significant effect. But you should also tell him, because our life does not actually end forever. Materialism now believes that after we die, there is nothing left, but that's not the case. Death is just a stop along the journey of our life. You simply change to another form, another body, another way of living. Therefore, when we are facing death, we should not be afraid and should perform more good deeds and virtuous actions in our lives, make aspirations for the next life, and aim to do even more meaningful things. In fact, many people really start to believe in Buddhism when they are faced with death. It's quite common for people to seek help from Buddhism at the last minute. But for those of us here, let this serve as a reminder. I hope everyone can be mentally prepared in advance so that when you are really in that situation, like he is, you can face it calmly. Just like many Buddhists among us, when they pass away, they are especially peaceful. Why is that? Because Buddhism has methods. With these methods, it's like a soldier who has undergone training in peacetime. When he is actually on the battlefield, he can put those actions to use. Therefore, it's best to provide him with psychological comfort. We also often recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra and chant Amitabha for him. Perhaps we pray for the blessings of the three jewels. For example, I once knew a college student who was diagnosed with cancer. Later, she put everything aside. Before she passed away, she devoted herself to chanting the Buddha's name, and as a result, she miraculously recovered. So sometimes the power of the mind is important. It's best to sincerely take refuge in the three jewels.
Respected Khenpo Sodargye, it is truly an honor to meet you in person today. I am a staff member at Xi'an Jiaotong University. I also work for the Shanxi Province Moral Culture Research Association. I would like to ask two questions. First, it is true that Buddhism is extremely good. But as an ordinary person, when faced with the vast and boundless teachings of Buddhism and with so many volumes in the Tripitaka, for an average person, there are also many schools such as Tibetan Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, and Han Buddhism. Some people even feel that others might see it as a bit superstitious. As a university teacher, and since we also face many students, how exactly should we go about studying Buddhism? It's a rare opportunity to meet Khenpo Sodargye today, so I would like to ask for your guidance. How can ordinary people like us truly let the teachings of Buddhism enter our hearts? That's my first question. My second question is, as a staff member of the Shanxi Province Moral Culture Research Association, Khenpo Sodargye just mentioned several times that we are now in an age of moral decline. We also really want to do our best to improve our own moral standards. We hope to do something to help raise the moral standards of society as well. What should we do to achieve this in the best possible way? Please provide your guidance.
As for the first question, I think that since Buddhist teachings are truly vast and profound, like an ocean of wisdom, if we try to really and completely master all of it within our short lifetime, it would certainly be extremely difficult. However, the great masters and eminent monks of the past all relied on the pith instructions of their teachers, studying through concise teachings and brief treatises. When many people ask me this question, I often offer a suggestion based on my own personal experience. There is a particular treatise that I have shared on many occasions. As I mentioned earlier, there's the Bodhicariyavatara, and there's another treatise, The Words of My Perfect Teacher. The Words of My Perfect Teacher, from the rarity of human birth to the final stages, including how we can be reborn in the Western Pure Land of ultimate bliss. On the surface, it may seem like just a book, but within this single book, it actually contains all the essential teachings of both the Sutrayana and Tantrayana traditions. In recent years, I have given a very detailed explanation of it. The transcripts of these teachings, when compiled into text, amount to about 8 books. If we elaborate extensively, there is a great deal of content. But if we condense it, it can be just a single book of a few hundred pages. If you study this book thoroughly, even once, it basically provides a structural framework. And you could say it covers the main aspects of Buddhism, such as generating bodhicitta, taking refuge, as well as how we practice the 10 virtuous deeds, discern cause and effect, and so on. The most important key issues should be understandable. It is very important for university students and teachers to systematically study Buddhism. Otherwise, many people nowadays have turned it into a kind of superficial formality. This includes those in monasteries as well. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, appearances are necessary, but as Buddhists, if we lack genuine experience or realization, it is indeed extremely difficult to guide others. Therefore, as teachers, it is especially necessary to truly cultivate an altruistic mind and place importance on moral culture. So, when it comes to moral culture, how should we proceed in the future? Because I'm not very familiar with the mission or operational methods of your center, but overall, I think that whatever we do, it may not produce immediate results in a short period of time. It should be approached in a long-term and steady manner. In addition, we can adopt modern corporate management and business models and gradually, step by step, start with university students as well as teachers, and then gradually broaden our reach. Based on our own capabilities and the structure of our own organization, we should first, step by step, let more people become aware of some of the particularly alarming situations in today's society. Once everyone understands the importance, then we can promote it to society at large. During this process, we shouldn't be discouraged just because we encounter some difficulties. Nowadays, many people, whether it's about promoting Buddhism or moral values, may look at you with a different attitude. But in fact, that's unreasonable. What we should be doing now is saving our culture. We need to have a genuine and heartfelt sense of joy in this process, as well as a courageous and determined heart. Only in this way can we truly bring about great benefit.
Respected Khenpo Sodargye, greetings to you, Master. I am a promoter of culture and I would like to ask for your insights. It is an honor to meet you today. I would like to know, what is the relationship between religion and non-religion? Do you actually think that Buddhism is a religion, or in your opinion, is it a non-religion?
I think, in my personal view, Buddhism is both a religion in some respects and a non-religion in other ways. Does this seem contradictory? Not at all. It's actually from 2 different perspectives. Because as one of the world's 4 major religions, Buddhism is indeed universally recognized as a religion by people from many different cultures. However, if you look more closely at Buddhist teachings, you will see that they can actually be applied to all fields of knowledge and learning. So in this sense, we can also refer to Buddhism as a non-religion. It is, in fact, a form of education. That's why nowadays many respected figures in the West, as well as in Hong Kong and Taiwan, often explain to people in various settings that Buddhism is actually not a religion, it's a form of education. They describe it as a particularly perfect form of education that guides humanity toward goodness. I think both perspectives are meaningful because at different levels there are different ways of understanding.
I am a young teacher at Xi'an Jiaotong University. I've only been teaching here for less than half a year, and my major is philosophy. After studying philosophy for more than 10 years, I found that I was still very confused. So I asked a question: if I take refuge in Buddhism or another religion, can I attain my own happiness?
As for whether taking refuge can truly bring happiness, to be honest, I really can't guarantee it. Perhaps it can, but ultimately it depends on each individual. But in terms of meaning and value, I think taking refuge, I should say, as someone who has studied Buddhism for many years and combining that with my own personal experience, if I were to answer you, it will definitely be beneficial to your happiness, because right now, as I mentioned earlier, sentient beings in this life have to experience the karmic consequences from their previous lives. Maybe you committed many negative deeds in your past life, so even if you take refuge in this life, if you haven't finished experiencing the retribution from before, to be honest, you might not be very happy. But if you take refuge in this life, it will definitely be meaningful for your happiness in your next life. So whether or not you take refuge in Buddhism depends on yourself. There are also reasons of faith involved. There are also many people who, after taking refuge and studying the Dharma, have indeed experienced changes in their outlook on life and values. This includes many who may have committed all kinds of misdeeds in the past, but after taking refuge, their lives gained a sense of direction. At the very least, they no longer harm sentient beings.
Respected Khenpo Sodargye, good afternoon. I am currently an MBA student at Xi'an Jiaotong University. I am very fortunate to have this opportunity today. Unfortunately, each person can only ask 2 questions. I have many questions about life and work. Let me start with a brief explanation because I work in investment. My problem might also be related to the nature of my work. I would also like to ask the master for some guidance. I recently met an entrepreneur. It's also one of our projects. This entrepreneur encountered a very obvious dilemma between profit and morality. This market is a fully competitive market. If the raw materials used in his products are to meet standards for human health and so on in order to be qualified, then his costs would be much higher than his competitors, even 3 to 4 times higher. But because he had a solid foundation to begin with, having transitioned from real estate, he had some accumulated resources. He has always stuck to this philosophy. The products I make must first ensure the safety of others' health. But after 2 years in the market, he found that the cost of his products was much higher than others. And after these products were made, when customers used them, the advantages of the raw materials couldn't be seen in the short term. So as a result, he often, when we talked some time ago, he said that now it's really very hard and quite challenging for this business to keep going. He's facing a tough decision. Of course, I can't disclose what kind of business this is. Now, he's also using raw materials that are harmful to the human body to make products. This way, his production costs have dropped. It was obvious when I looked at his cash ledger, there was a clear improvement starting from June this year. For entrepreneurs like him, with such doubts, how should they make a choice? I'd like to ask for your advice, Master. Thank you.
Actually, nowadays, many companies that manufacture products, indeed, some of what they produce, such as, for example, poses great harm to the physical and mental health of society. Whether it's pharmaceuticals or food, this phenomenon is quite common. But personally, I truly believe that, of course, especially when it comes to excessive behaviors that completely disregard the lives and well-being of others, will sooner or later face retribution. But for everyone here, whether you're studying for an MBA or doing something else, you must be careful in your future careers. First of all, we should try our best in this lifetime not to make the conscious decision to become someone who in any way harms other living beings. Even if your own standard of living or the money you earn isn't much, you should still lead a very pure and clean life. If we can be completely pure, as some great masters in Tibetan Buddhism have said, all aspects of our lives exist in a society where people's thoughts and intentions can lead to all kinds of wrongdoing. But if we deliberately harm sentient beings, that is extremely unreasonable. So what kind of attitude should we have towards them in the future? Of course, it's impossible for us to expose or stop each and every one of them. We don't have that ability. But I think among those of us present here, some people will definitely have the ability and the strength in this regard in the future. At that time, if your mindset isn't steady, it could harm society. Why are there so many corrupt high-ranking officials nowadays? In the end, they deceive themselves and others, destroying both themselves and others. There are many such cases, as everyone knows.
The supervisor of this building is already getting a bit anxious. There have been a lot of questions, And they were all very interesting, but it's a bit of a pity. Here's the thing, my friend still isn't feeling very well. So, for the last question, I'll briefly ask the master. I remember when you were talking about your past, you mentioned that as a child you often got into fights. But now, in your words and demeanor, there is a dreamlike gentleness. So this kind of change, what was, in your opinion, the most important factor that influenced it?
When I was young, I really did love to fight. I remember when I was in middle school, there was one day when I got into 5 fights. I even got hurt myself, and the teachers were planning to expel me and so on. But in the end, I wasn't expelled. Fortunately, I wasn't. When I was in elementary school, now when I go back to my elementary school alma mater, because back then, the atmosphere at our elementary school wasn't good at all. I never really met a single true, because at that time there weren't any real Han Chinese teachers. They were all substitute teachers from the Tibetan ethnic group. So now when I return to my alma mater, I can't recall what I actually learned back then or what it was like. I often got into fights with people here and there. In the mountains and waters around the school, even by this riverbank, I fought with a certain classmate, and by that riverbank too. Because back then we really loved it. We couldn't really fight at school. So we'd go up to that mountain to fight or into these hills to fight. We often made plans there, and after making plans, we'd say, wait until after lunch, then come here and we'll start fighting. That's how my life was back then. But honestly, after I started studying Buddhism, compared to before, the difference is really, really huge. I think the main reason is that it's mainly through studying the Bodhicariyavatara and the blessings of Mahayana Buddhism. I know very clearly that my personality has completely changed. And it's not just me. There was a monk in our institute who once had a conflict with another monk. During the conflict, I heard him say myself, because I've studied Mahayana Buddhism, I can't do it now. Otherwise, with my old temper, I would have beaten you up. I would have fought you. So sometimes it's not just about many people's mindsets. It's actually really about their mindsets. I think that after studying Mahayana Buddhism, one can completely change. But this dharma also depends on a certain karmic connection. Some people are especially receptive, while others may not be. It was the same during the Buddha's time. If there is no karmic connection, just as it says in the Abhisamaya Lankara, even if the heavenly king sends down a wondrous rain, if the seeds are already destroyed, there's nothing that can be done. Although all the Buddhas indeed manifest themselves in the world, those without the right karmic connection cannot benefit. This is also closely related to one's own karmic connections and virtuous roots.
We don't have much time left. Next, let's invite our student representative to present flowers to Khenpo. Let us give a warm round of applause to thank Khenpo.